Hi, this is Kimberly, Pearl, and family with Cookie Conundrum. In this inquiry activity, students are given the problem, we're baking cookies, and our recipe calls for baking soda, but we only have baking powder. Can we substitute that without any negative effects? Students were given specific materials, but they did need to design their own experiment and discuss their results and make conclusions. In this activity, I had my 4 children participate, and I definitely took into account the preconceptions that they came to the table with, as well as how their background knowledge would impact their formation of the contextual framework, and I encouraged metacognition throughout this activity. This activity falls into the STEM perspective that science is a discipline that incorporates other disciplines, namely this time mathematics due to the data that students would have to record, as well as engineering since they were designing their experiment. Teaching for conceptual understanding is especially important in terms of paying heed to developmental factors since my kids range in age from 4th grade to 7th grade, as well as providing for that rich ongoing assessment. I did predictive questioning throughout the activity, not giving the kids the answers, but rather encouraging them to come up with them on their own based on the questions that I asked throughout the activity. 21st century perspectives, mainly this time we honed in on complex communications and social skills, which, as you can imagine, working with siblings was especially notable for this lesson, as well as non-routine problem solving, because this was not an activity that the kids were familiar with. Levels of inquiry, this is definitely a level 2, seeing as I provided the problem and the question to my kids, but they were responsible for coming up with a procedure as well as the solution, and it falls as a guided inquiry activity. I did follow the 5E model when planning this lesson. And on the matrix for assessing and planning scientific inquiry, this lesson mainly fell towards the most complex end of the continuum. As you can see when we get into explaining results, I did do a lot of scaffolding for the kids, so it wasn't as rigorous as possible, but they also contributed a lot on their own. Here are my references. And now time for the inquiry activity. My worksheet goes through the engineering design process, so you can see we defined the problem and then the kids identified the materials that were provided as well as any additional materials they would need. They identified the constraints and then they brainstormed their ideas for experimental design. In my videos, you'll see that they reference making a baking soda volcano, which they've done in the past. So that was a great way to bring in that background knowledge. And then they finally selected what they wanted to do first, which was to put baking soda and baking powder in separate bottles, add vinegar, and see what the reactions were. After they did that, I encouraged them to create another test in order to make sure their results were valid. So they iterated and they decided to get balloons and see what would happen. Let's watch some videos to find out what the results were.
Okay, so watch what's happening. This is baking powder. This is baking soda. Talk about what's happening.
Well, it's exploding. Like a volcano. 2, 1. Oh my gosh! It's inflating!
Quicker, Marin.
Can I take
Okay,
it
let
off?
go of the balloon now.
Oh no, I feel like ours is about to explode.
No, it's getting.
So talk about your results.
So, mine was very gassy around there, but with this one, it's making the balloon very big. With this, it's only a little potato.
So Kristen, what did you say?
This one has a higher volume.
Higher volume of what?
Gas.
What gas?
Not gas.
Okay. So that would be a gaseous gas. That would be something that you would need to research further, right? If it's scientists or anything, something they can research it further. So when
The kids had really great discussion about their conclusions, and I wish I had time to include more video. If you want more resources, check out my discussion on the board. Thanks.